Hey everyone, Model Man Frank here. Welcome to the show tonight. Um, Hopefully everybody was able to join us, and hope we have a good. I know tonight. I hope everybody's enjoying their Memorial Day weekend. Today we say thanks to all of the fallen who fought in wars past. And it's a sad thing that we have to have war to solve our country's differences. And many of those people fought bravely for something they believed in, and they fought for freedom in our country. And but today is a special broadcast tonight. We're going to actually talk about the L-1011 and Lockheed's L-1011. Just to give you guys a first instances before we get into our subject matter of the Lockheed Electra. The Lockheed L-1011, the TriStar. Just to let you guys know, we're on right over here. We're on Patreon. If you're looking for posts on certain material or anything like that, Patreon is free to join. You can become a free member and follow me on Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do that through there monetarily. And I post almost every single photo that I put of whatever happens on this channel. I post over there. Whether it be things that I'm doing in the shop or model airplane wise, I post it there. So please support the channel. Visit me over on Patreon and give a thumbs up to the video. And if you're not only, is it your first time watching this video, please hit the subscribe button if you like the content, and you'll be alerted when something gets posted. So back to the program at hand, we're going to talk about the Lockheed L-1011, which was formerly named the TriStar, but it was also known by those who flew it and those who were on the aircraft when was a passenger. It was also known as the Whisper Liner or the Whisper Jet. The 727 was also known as the Whisper Jet, and we spoke about that one in previous. And we also spoke last week about the 777, the 767. Before that, we spoke about the 747. And last week's program, we spoke about the 777 and the 767. And something that we saw is that the 777, they were thinking of making it also a tri-jet, so it would look that DC-10 type of feel to it, or an L-1011 look. The L-1011 was in a class of its own. The L-1011 was developed by Lockheed Martin, which is Martin Aircraft, was purchased by Lockheed. And Lockheed, it's not the first time that Lockheed has delved into the airline market. They had the Lockheed Electra Junior. They had quite a number of aircrafts. They had the Lockheed Electra that famously flew for Eastern and flew for a number of different companies, including Braniff. It didn't have much success, and it kept losing propellers, and motors would fall off, and there were other mechanical problems with the Lockheed Electra, and it really almost put the company in bankruptcy completely. And it didn't put it on firm ground when they started to develop the Lockheed L-1011 and break off into the jet market. Lockheed was having financial difficulties when they started actually developing the L-1011, especially because of the Lockheed Electra. The Lockheed Electra was withdrawn from service after a certain number of years, and then Lockheed started looking at making a jet and making the jump into the tri-jet wide body market. Lockheed, when the aircraft was being thought of they were looking at new ways. There were new technologies coming out on building the aircraft, how the aircraft was going to be manufactured, how the layout and the entire inside of the aircraft was going to be. The aircraft in question, which is the L-1011, there was going to be two models. It was going to be the 200 model and then the 500 model. I'm sorry, the 200, the 300, 400, 500 models. And there was only going to be a handful of them made. This aircraft came out ahead of its time. And what I'm going to show you in this broadcast tonight is some of the things that were technically ahead of its time. If the aircraft, my feeling is if the aircraft had actually come out during, let's say, modern times, which would have been like maybe 1990s, 1999, it would have been an aircraft that probably would have been widely accepted because of the way the layout of the aircraft was and the performance that came out of this plane. This aircraft was going to have a very unique layout. I'm actually going to blow this up so y'all can see how the setup was in terms of seating. So you had in the front of the aircraft, you had the cockpit, you had you had first, second classes. If you notice it in this video, or actually in this layout here that you see, you'll see that the aircraft has no center galleys. Well, it does, but you don't see the different class bathrooms. Where do you see the restrooms? They're all the way in the back of the aircraft. And it's unique that the way it's set up. You know, it's so unique that all the restrooms are in the back of the aircraft. Also, very key on this aircraft, the galley section that you would see normally in the front of the plane towards the back of the plane, they weren't there. They wanted to make sure that when they made a product, Lockheed, they made a product that was for passenger comfort. And this aircraft, being that it was going to be unique, they did something different. They took a playbook out of Boeing aircraft, which was the Model 377, which was the Stratoliner, and they took they put in an elevator that went down to the first floor, okay, into the cargo area, and that was where the galley was going to be. So the galley was actually below this top section that you see here. There was a little elevator that went up and down, and that's how they would bring up meals. So this aircraft was already setting a different standard in terms of how the aircraft was going to be laid out inside. So the airplane was being marketed towards the medium to long haul routes. Okay, it was marketed to Eastern Airlines, United Airlines, Delta, TWA, all the major carriers within the United States, including Pan American. And something interesting, the plane was just not getting its footing. So, like I was saying before, the aircraft was going to start being manufactured, but the company itself, Lockheed, had fallen on financial problems. So Lockheed was going to make a partner with Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce was also having financial difficulties. So when that happened, Rolls-Royce had to go to their government and ask them for help, because if not, they weren't going to be able to make this jet. And this was a make or break situation going on with Rolls-Royce. Also, Lockheed went to the government to ask for help also. So the aircraft was a little bit late coming out. First flight for this aircraft was on November 17th, 1970. The aircraft the engine thrust came from all three engines. There was going to be an engine on the top, and the engine layout was going to be different than the DC-10. If you have never seen this aircraft before, or this is, like I said, this is something that you've never really actually thought that you probably never, if it depends on who is watching, you probably never really sat in this aircraft. This aircraft, like I said, was not widely accepted. A lot of major carriers refused. American Airlines did not have this plane. American Airlines decided not to purchase the aircraft. So when the aircraft was going to be rolled out, it only had a handful of buyers that bought the aircraft. Let me show you a photo of what this aircraft looked like. Sorry, y'all. I'm going to give you actually a cross section here so you can see this unique style plane that everybody so there you go. As you can see in this photo, I'm actually going to blow it up. It's going to take up the whole screen, and I'll talk in the background here. As you can see, the aircraft was going to have an engine on top, just like the DC-10. But the engine, that was just a ductwork. So that was the intake for the airplane. But the engine, the aircraft's interior wouldn't have... the engine was all the way in the tail, just like the 727. So you had an intake that came in and then went all the way, and then the actual noise from that whoa, whoa, whoa engine was not on top of you or to the side. It was all the way in the back of the plane. That's what made it so quiet. Also, the nose of the aircraft made it unique also. It made it very... the way that the construction was made on this plane... now, Lockheed knew how to build an airplane. They had success with Amelia Earhart's Lockheed Electra Jr., and they had the P-38 behind them. They had the SR-71. They knew how to make a fast but economical airplane. When Lockheed put money into this plane, they really went all out. Like I said, if the aircraft had come out in the 1990s, I think it would have done a lot better. But again, it came out in the 1970s, and we all know what happened in the 1970s with the fuel crisis, and you had a lot of economic hardships in the 1970s going on. It just didn't reach the profitability, you're right, Trevor, of what was, the profitability of the DC-10 and the 747 just didn't hit the L-1011. But I think it would have been done better if it had done better and had come out at this time period. It would have been, and then with all the carbon fibers that we have, I think this plane would have done great. It was a roomy plane. You could, tall people would not have a problem. Seating was available. The availability was there. Passenger comfort was foremost. It was a wide-body aircraft, so you had 2 seats on each side, and then you had 3 seats or 4 seats in the middle. You had broken up into 4 different class sections in this plane. So, like I said, the aircraft was rolled out in 17th of November. That was the first flight. The first aircraft was rolled out in April of 1972. First flight was not in 1970. It was actually, the first flight was in 1972. It's April 14th of 1972. And revenue service began on the 26th. The aircraft was certified. Let me rephrase that. The aircraft was certified on April 14th, 1972. And then on the 26th, it began service with Eastern Airlines. So my mistake in that tidbit of information. That my notes were wrong on that one, so sorry about that. Plane began service with Eastern Airlines. Eastern Airlines was actually one of the biggest purchasers of the aircraft. They purchased the aircraft widely, and Delta Airlines, Pan Am, Gulf Air, like I said, TWA, PSA, Pacific Southwest Airlines, Pacific Southern Airlines, I think it was. They were also known as the Happy Plane because they had a little smiley face in the front of the plane. National also, I think National Airlines also had one of these aircraft. So a total of 250 of these planes were built. It just didn't do well. And like I said, I'll say it again. If I haven't said it once on this broadcast, and I said it 3 times, I think this aircraft came out in the wrong time period. It was a retro-looking plane. As you can see with, the Eastern Airlines logo and livery, that hockey puck style, old transition look to it. It wasn't... They had this type of look. They had the painted look on the later models, and then they had the chrome feature look. Delta Airlines had a really cool looking color scheme for this plane. I don't know. Let me show you what I think. I mean, I don't know if you think it is. I mean, the old colors were really cool looking. I'm just pretty much probably very old school because of that. But this old, what they call the wedge tail screening of the aircraft, that's the Delta Airlines look. TWA, I had a TWA picture. I didn't get it to show tonight, but you can go online and look up the TWA photo. TWA was just 2 red bars and then the big TWA logo. Pan Am also had this aircraft. They had taken over them from National Airlines. Pan Am only bought 12 of these planes, so they weren't a big purchaser of this aircraft. Pan Am just didn't see... They had the DC-10, so they were more of a purchaser with the DC-10. I really do think what it was is that Lockheed didn't really put 100% into selling the aircraft. I don't think they really did a great job marketing the plane the way it should have been. Again, they were having financial difficulties in the 1970s, and that's why they had to go to the government for help. Lockheed was better at selling military-style aircraft like, the P-80 or the F-80, the T-33, all these military aircraft, the SR-71, and they were doing missiles and missile technology and things like that. Also, during the 1970s, there was a large downturn in air travel because of the impending fuel crisis that was coming up. Also, in the 1970s, we were still at war in Vietnam. We were still having that conflict. So, April 1972, Eastern Airlines took delivery of their aircraft. Again, only 250 of these different types of these aircraft were built. Pan Am had 12. And it was kind of funny because, I was looking up the information on the Pan Am Clippers. And, side note, their Clipper names were very interesting. And I'm actually going to look in my book here, Pan Am Legacy Aviation. And one of them was very interesting. It was actually one of the Clipper names for the Pan Am L-1011, and was the Warhawk. They had Clipper Eagle. I'm going to tell you some of the ones. And the reason I'm concentrating a little bit on Pan Am is because, I have a book for them. And TWA had the aircraft also, but Pan Am always gave names to every one of their aircraft. They all named them off their Clippers. So I'm just going to read to you some of the names that they had for the Pan Am Clippers. Let me see if I can pull up an image so you can see what the color scheme for the Pan Am aircraft looked like. I think you'll find it very interesting. Let's see if I have one here in my roster. You know, I don't think I do. Oh yeah, I do. Here I go. I'm going to show you a picture of the Clipper Eagle so you all can see what I'm looking at. So yeah, they had the Clipper Eagle, and this is the Pan Am. You know, it had the big globe with the white. I mean, very pretty look to it. You know, big bold letters, and you know, the photo you're seeing here is actually a Clipper Eagle, I believe. Now, the aircraft that they had was the Clipper Eagle, the Clipper Flying Eagle, the National Eagle. They had Eagle Wing, Clipper Northern Eagle, Clipper Bald Eagle, Clipper Golden Eagle, the Clipper George T. Baker. If you're in Miami and you know what George T. Baker is, please put it in the answer. Who is George T. Baker? Here's the question. Who is George T. Baker? And why is it they named it the Clipper George T. Baker? So put that answer down in the comment field down below, and I'll make sure to say something about it in next week's podcast. I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to let you guys look up the information and look it up because it's very good. That's your homework for this week. Again, put the comment in the below, and that's a great conversation piece for y'all. Also, it's very popular. That name is synonymous in the Miami area, Miami-Dade County, Florida. So look it up. They had the Clipper Black Hawk, Clipper Warhawk, Clipper Wild Duck, and the Clipper White Falcon. Those are the 12 aircraft that Pan Am had. Now, here's the thing that I always look up information on my planes when I'm, especially Pan Am aircraft, because they always have the Clipper names. Also, Eastern Airlines, they didn't really name their planes. They just, gave them numbers and designations. They weren't really named that way. I never really saw any names on Pan Am aircraft. So So I see the Clipper Warhawk. I'm like, let me look up Clipper Warhawk. So I look up the Clipper Warhawk, and I'm trying to figure out where is this name coming from. Why would they name it after a P-40 Warhawk? I'm thinking the Warhawk, that's so famous from World War II and the Flying Tigers. And I'm looking and I can't find it. All of a sudden, this one guy keeps pulling up Clipper Warhawk under the Clipper Warhawk name. His name was George Washington Jackman Jr. He was a senator, made his money making Clipper ships, and the Warhawk was a Clipper ship. It was actually one of many Clipper ships that were made in the 1800s, and it was actually used in the coolie trade. And if no one knows what the coolie trade is, if you're watching this video and trying to figure out what the heck is this, look it up. You can find it online, what the coolie trade is and who George Washington Jackman is. Just look up the Warhawk and you'll see the name. It was actually on Wikipedia. I know I say not to really watch Wikipedia. Some of the things that are in Wikipedia are questionable, but some of the information is pretty good. Books are better, but you can't find all this information in every single book. So back to the plane. The last iteration of the L-1011 was the 500 series. The 500 series was to compete against the 747 SP, and it was doing pretty well because the 500 series. So the 500 series had three Rolls-Royce motors. They were RB2111s. Okay, producing 50,000 pounds per thrust. That's a lot of thrust for takeoff. So 50,000 pounds times 3. It's 150,000 pounds. You had 248-ton max on the aircraft. That was gross weight takeoff. So 248 tons, that was pretty good. The one thing about the aircraft, so the L-1011-200, okay, had a 48,000 pound thrust times 3 on each engine. Relative size, length, the L-1011-500 was actually a shorter body, but it produced more thrust itself, and you could carry less than the 200, and so you had two different types of the 500. You had the 524 and the 524B. The B model had less seating by 40 seats, and the 524 regular model without the letter designation at the end had seating capacity for 345 passengers. That was also including the crew. So the last models of the 500, the 500B came out in 1979. So the aircraft was only produced really, the different models came out within a 4 or 5 year time span. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. Not a 4 or 5 year. It was 10 years. The aircraft was come out during that time period. The last model to roll off of the assembly line was in 1982. When that happened, the L-1011 was, the operations of the L-1011 were ceased, and Lockheed decided to go into the Defense Department, defense manufacturing of defense aircraft, military-style aircraft, and space aircraft. The plane was just, again, it's my biggest, you read information. I got to fly on this plane when it was under Eastern Airlines. It was truly a very quiet plane. It was in the 1980s. We flew on it a couple of times. My uncle used to work for Eastern Airlines. He was a mechanic. We used to get tickets from like buddy passes, and we also, my father also did a lot of traveling. He worked for General Telephone, which was GTE at the time, and we did a lot of traveling back and forth with that also. This plane was very quiet inside. Really, there was nothing really to say that it was a bad plane to fly. There were quite a number of crashes with the aircraft. The aircraft did not have a great safety record, but it wasn't a safety record because of the mechanics' point of view. It was a safety record because of the pilots. Some of the aircraft that crashed were pilot errors. One of the famous L-1011 crashes happened in Miami, and I'm going to touch base on that one. Flight 401 took off from JFK and was flying to Miami. It was a routine flight. Everything was going on without a hitch until getting closer to landing. The aircraft was coming in for a landing. They had gone already through their pre-screening of getting the passengers ready. And as the aircraft was coming into final approach, the pilot, they put the landing gear down, and all three were not green. So on the cockpit, in the cockpit, you have the flight engineer, you have the navigator, the first officer, and the captain. And when you're flying, you have all three of them working in unison. So what happened is that this is the cockpit layout. If you're looking over, if you're looking on the right hand side of your screen, you'll actually see the cockpit layout of the aircraft. Um, so on the dashboard there, you would see 3 green coming down. One of the lights was not showing green, which was the nose gear. So if you look in the diagram on my right hand side, you would actually see what happened is that the crew decided to do a go around, and then at the same time they sent a flight engineer down into the hole. So just behind the engineer, there's a door that actually takes you downstairs into this hole where you could actually look down a peek hole and you would be able to see the landing gear. And you would be able to actually look into that area to see if the landing gear is down or any other any other problems, or see the ground or anything like that. So the engineer was down there. He was trying to see if they could solve the problem. They had a relief pilot also there with them, and everybody was so enthralled with what was going down in the hole. The captain didn't pay attention, and he tapped the yoke. And when he did that, the plane was in autopilot when they were doing their go around. When he touched the yoke, the aircraft went out of autopilot and started the descent. So the aircraft started descending slowly and started losing altitude. All this time, everybody's looking down in this hole trying to figure out. So the tower gets back to them and says, hey, if you guys do a flyby, I'll be able to see if the landing gear is down. So one of the guys actually hits the lights and sees that it flickers. So they come to the realization, hey, let's just do a flyby. We'll see what's going on. They turn, everybody gets back into their seats, and the captain goes, hey, what's going on here? You hear the co-pilot say, are we descending? And the pilot says, what's going on here? And then 10 seconds later, the plane crashes. So that's what happened with the L-1011 in Miami. There was also a crash with Delta Airlines, and that was with wind shear. That one, every plane deals with wind shear and weather conditions and things like that. There was a movie made about 401. A lot of the planes that crashed in the 1980s and 1970s and 1960s, there were a lot of crashes, in terms of, there are movies made about these crashes, and you could pretty much look up any airline online and find. There was 2 movies made about Eastern Airlines. On Flight 401, there was a conspiracy theory going around. Some believe it's true. If you believe it's true, it is true. If you don't believe it's true, then it's not true. We're not going to go there today. All right? So what happened is that apparently the captain for the aircraft kept showing. So there was back in that time period, there were parts taken off the plane after it crashed and put on other planes to fly with. Because again, remember, the L-1011 that wasn't selling well, they need to keep the aircraft flying, so other L-1011s had to be kept in service, had to be used. So anything that wasn't destroyed and was recertified as okay was thrown back into service. So Norm, you're correct. It was a good aircraft for long haul routes. It could actually fly up to 6,000 miles. That was better than the 747 and the DC-10 at the time. But getting back to the story, Flight 401, people say that you could hear So there was a ghost of Flight 401, and there was a book made, and there was a movie made, and supposedly, the ghost made its presence known on other aircraft. They changed the name of the aircraft that it was on, and so on and so forth. But TriStar, Flight 401, there is a movie that's out there with William Shatner. You can find it here on YouTube, and I think I can find it for you guys. I'll put a link in the description box below so you guys can see it. Getting back to what Norm Garraza said, he is correct. The 500 series carried less passengers, but it could fly up to 6,000 miles. That's better than the 747. It's not as good as the 747 SP, but that's pretty darn good. It could fly long-haul flights. My thought, the reason I'm saying that if this aircraft was flying in today's market and had made an impact in today's market, I could look into it. The way that the setup was inside, where the galley was down below and you had just seating, you could make it into, like, you'd have the business class section where you could have the sleeper beds. And being that the plane was quiet, you'd have a great plane. You'd be able to fly, do the 6,000 mile route on this plane. I think the plane would have done done a little bit better. You could have had GE engines on it. You could have had Pratt and Whitney engines, and offer Rolls-Royce. You'd have 3 different engine manufacturers building the aircraft. Also, carbon fiber technology, the way it is, Lockheed would have been able to compete with the 787. I think this plane really did come out in the wrong year and came out at the wrong time. It was just, everything was working out against the plane, and it's sad that that's what happened. It was a really cool plane to fly on. Growing up in Eastern Airlines, I think I remember correctly. I even took the plane one time from New York to Miami just before it stopped flying for Eastern. I'm sorry, I was on Pan Am. I flew it, and we were, as a family, we flew from Miami, from New York to Miami for like Christmas vacation, and then we came back on a 727. But the aircraft was used on short haul routes and on long haul routes. This aircraft, as a matter of fact, when I was going to school at LaGuardia, at trade school at College of Aeronautics, we used to sit up in the lunch. We had a special lunch area where you could actually sit. It looked like a control tower, and you could sit up there and you could watch the planes landing. And I remember one time, it's coming in back into my head right now, I remember sitting up there and we actually watched an L-1011 land in LaGuardia Airport. And it came in right over the Queensboro highway and just landed on that runway that actually extends out over Flushing Bay. And it was a sight to see, because you really had to have good flight hours to be able to land that aircraft there. Also, the DC-10 would land at LaGuardia Airport. There were 2 large wide-body aircraft that you saw. I don't think a 777 would land at LaGuardia Airport nowadays, or an A380 for that matter. But you didn't see 747s. You would see them actually, if you looked off towards the east, you could see JFK off in the distance, and you could see the 747s and the 767s going in there. But 757s, 727s, DC-9s, MD-80s, Metroliners, Fokker 100s, which were the small regional jets, and the L-1011 and the DC-10 all flew into LaGuardia. Also ATRs, the Sherpa, which was the Shorts 360, and also the I said Metroliners. Oh, the Brazilias, the 120s, the Embraers. So that was where the aircraft that would go into LaGuardia, and those are the aircraft that I saw a lot. And for the most part, I flew on most of them. in and out of New York, or going down to visit family in Miami, or if we went out of Clearwater, going to various areas, either New York or going overseas and things like that. Um, it was a cool airline. It was a cool plane to fly on, and never got to really use the restroom on it. I thought that would have been cool if we could go into the back, but I was able to be on that plane, and it was really interesting to see the different classes. As a kid growing up, mom and dad got to sit in the front, which was first class. Seats were wide, and you had a lot of leg room, business class basically. And then in the coach class actually had good seating, especially if you're a 6 foot guy, a 6'8" guy, basketball player. You still had good seating. There was a lot of leg room in the coach seating area, but you were also in the back. And it was kind of funny because I was talking to my wife today, and we were watching another video online, and I was making the comment that seats nowadays, they don't look like they're really like comfortable. They look like they're thin, like about that thick. Seats back in the 1980s and the 70s and jet aircraft back that time, you had about this much padding on the plane. I mean, it was a comfy seat to sit in. You could really sleep. I remember sleeping on the 727 I took an early morning flight from New York to Miami to see my parents because they were living in South Florida at the time, and I had all three seats to myself. So I basically laid down, fastened my seat flip, and took a nap right there. So I would read a book on there. I was very comfortable. But now they pile you in like a sardine into a little steel tin can and basically fly you to your destination. Air travel's changed so much. I haven't been on a plane since 2007. So, but again, a story for another time. That's all I have to really say about the L-1011. If you have anything that you want to add to it, please leave a comment in the leave comments, and I'll mention them in the next video. As I said again, yeah, I really wish this aircraft would come out later. I think, like I said, the way that this aircraft was just, everything was working against this plane when it came out. I think for all the tri-jets, for the DC-10 even, the DC-10, the tri-jet, DC-10. DC-10 had a lot of problems, a lot of crashes for the DC-10, mechanical issues, poor maintenance, and it had a fatal flaw on the aircraft the first couple of years that it came out. Even with mechanical issues and design aspect of the aircraft. McDonnell Douglas tried to recoup with a later model, and they just never did, and they lost out, and ended up becoming part of Boeing aircraft. So, just to guys give you next week, I am going to talk about the McDonnell Douglas DC-9. The DC-9 was the predecessor to the MD-80s, the 82, the 81, the 83, the 87, and the MD-90 and MD-95, which would later on become the Boeing 717, because Boeing would eventually buy McDonnell Douglas. But yeah, we're going to talk about the DC-9, the different models that came out. DC-9 was also a relatively interesting little airliner. I flew on it quite a number of times growing up, and my father did, and everybody I knew grew up. It was widely used around many airlines, and when I worked for Spirit Airlines back in the 90s into the early 2000s, we had DC-9s flying, and I really would like to talk about the DC-9. The week after next, we'll talk about the MD-80 series, which was the last of the twin jets that McDonnell Douglas built. Like Norm. Oh, I didn't know that the L-1011 600 was a concept for a twin-engine version of the TriStar and was shorter than the 500. I didn't know that. That's a good point. Yeah. It would have been great if they had brought it out, but of course Lockheed, they decided not to. So I'm sure they would have changed the L-1011 designation and made it a different type of aircraft altogether, Norm. So I think they would have made it like something like, instead of the L-1011, maybe they would have come out and said it was the L-12, L-1012 or L-10. We don't know. But again, I really appreciate y'all joining. Norm, Trevor, anybody else. If you're watching this on playback, again, leave a thumbs up. Thumbs up. Share the video. And if you can, subscribe. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Tomorrow's Memorial Day. Please enjoy it with your families. Hug your families. Have a barbecue. Here in Florida, it's 95 degrees outside, so I have to mow the lawn. And I have a fun fly tomorrow, so I'll show some video. I'll first post it on Patreon, so you guys can, whoever's... Trevor, I appreciate you joining Patreon. Again, Patreon is free. I'm not going to send you guys any, it's not like Facebook. You don't have all the ads, and you don't have all the, mumbo jumbo coming up on, like, a fake book. I call it fake book because that's basically what it is. It's fake. But I show what I'm doing in my shop and the aircraft that I'm working on. I'm going to be posting more pictures of the ongoing work with the Puss Moth. On there, I'll show video of shorts doing the Puss Moth, and then later on the videos will come out here on YouTube. I do have a Rumble page, but I don't use it very often. Maybe I should, but I don't get a lot of views on Rumble, and Rumble has become more of a political video page for politics and for alternate views, and that's really what Rumble has become. Aviation-wise, YouTube's got a great algorithm for the aviation community and puts out a lot more stuff for aviation. I see that here on YouTube. So, but with all that said, thank you everybody for watching. Again, have a great weekend, and we'll see you guys on the next video, next week's video. Remember, McDonnell Douglas DC-9 is what we'll be talking about, and the different airlines that ran the DC-9. If I forgot something in this video, please leave a comment in the field below. So much to remember, so much to write down. I can't remember it all. So, again, we'll talk to y'all on the next one. Have a good night. Model Man.